Last episode, we discussed that great saints and mass shooters both heard voices. Great saints heard angelic voices to do great things, while mass shooters heard diabolical voices to commit horrible shootings. The world chalks the latter as some crazy and mentally ill person, yet mental issues don't make a person a killer. It's these voices that led people to do great acts, or the worst of actions. We all hear and listen to voices, which influences our decisions and actions every day. Are we listening to the right voice or not? This is important because these voices can make us a great saint or a bad sinner. Hello everyone, today's episode is about discerning the voices in our head and harnessing the power of those voices to become holy, like so many great and holy saints in the Catholic Church did. We will be doing a deeper dive on the four voices, which I call the voice of reason, the voice of passion, the angelic voices, and the diabolical voices. Not theoretical, but practical. Real-life Catholic advice from Practical Catholic.
Welcome to another episode of Practical Catholic with David Cease. Practical Catholic is a spiritual coaching show to help you find peace, love, and joy in family and work life. We are here each and every week to help you grow spiritually, to become successful in this life, and to be a saint for the life after.
My story begins in the summer of 1995. I had just finished a 4-week intense desert warfare training in the deserts of California, not including all of my enlistment and officer training in the Marines, and was now married to my beautiful wife for about 6 months, living in Orange County, Southern California. I came home from work and my wife says to me she is pregnant. My first thought was, I really did not want this baby. All I thought about was how I could not do all the things I wanted to do with this baby. My wife asks me, what's wrong? And I just changed the topic to, what's for dinner? You see, at that time I was a worldly, with little faith, even slightly agnostic. The next day, I remember having a great sense of joy, realizing all the things I could be doing with this baby, and how wonderful it would be, and how much I really wanted this baby. At about 20 weeks into her pregnancy, we traveled back to New York and New Jersey to visit her family and mine. It was during my visit with my parents in New Jersey that my wife started going into labor. She was only 20 weeks pregnant, and the chances of the survival for the baby is less than 1%. In other words, my wife, through her labor, is killing our child. We rushed her to the ER, and they went to the NICU ward. She would be going in and out of labor during this time, and at one point her contractions stopped. The doctors and nurses checked the child's heartbeat, and we could still hear the heartbeat. We got optimistic. My wife asked me if I would pray with her, and so we prayed an Our Father. Within minutes after we finished the Our Father, she started going into contractions again. Her water would break, and she would deliver our dead daughter. She would be pushing for over an hour, the difficulty of delivering a dead child, and I stood by her as the events unfolded. I was told in the Marines we could do anything. We're the defenders of our nation and our families. But all of my training in the Marines could not defend my wife from the pains of birth and having her delivering our premature child, and in essence killing our child. All my Marine training could not save my daughter from death. What did my prayers do? They in essence killed my daughter. What kind of God does that? You ask a simple request, a good request, a request to save a life, and nothing. There is no God, I said, or if there is one, he really doesn't care. I even prayed to this so-called God, and what did I get? Nothing. 3 years later, I would go through my reversion back to the Catholic Church. More deeper faith? During the years back to my faith, I would every once in a while ask God, why did you allow my daughter to die? And about 2 years later, in the summer of 2000, I was meditating on the cross, and I was tired from work, but just was meditating on the cross. And I asked the question to God, why did you allow my daughter to die? And I gently lay down on the floor. And I heard an audible voice which said, "Who is the better father?" And before I could even answer, it was like someone put a VCR in my head and played my whole life from high school to the point of the pregnancy, all my selfishness, my secular world, and worldly life. And then I said, "You are," as if I was talking to God the Father. And then a great joy entered my soul, and my body went into an ecstatic state, and the voice said, "No, she is here with me." Now, God is so brilliant, He actually answered 3 questions with 1 question. The first was, why did God allow her to die? And the answer, because the greatest desire for all fathers for their children is to go to heaven for the Heavenly Father, which she was, and which I probably would not have been able to do with the state I was in at that time. Second, where is my daughter? Is she in heaven, purgatory, or limbo? Where? And the answer, she is in heaven with God the Father. The third was my prayer answered the day she died? A lot of times we think that our prayers aren't answered, like I did at that moment in time when my daughter died. But my prayer was answered, even greater than expected, because she did not die, but she was born into heaven. This wasn't the only time I heard audible voices. But you're wondering, will I hear audible voices? Maybe, maybe not. But more importantly is the soft voices of our guardian angels in protecting ourselves from the other voices, especially the diabolical ones. So today's episode, we're going to talk about how to harness the power of the voices in our head. Last episode, we talked about how the voices in our heads in today's society and what is the problems that occur, and putting a context around the voices. And of course, we talked briefly about the 4 voices. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how a little bit more about those 4 voices and doing a deeper dive and to elaborate those 4 voices, how to encourage the good voices and minimize the bad voices, as well as discern which and leverage the voices to become a saint. So that's mainly what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So just to recap last episode, we realized that our decisions and actions are influenced by voices in our head, and we have them, okay? Some subtle, some, audible. We talked about Adam Lanza, the 20-year-old who killed 26 people, 20 of them between the ages of 6 and 7, and Stephen Paddock, who was the Vegas shooter who killed 61 people and injured 861, and how they heard voices, okay? And how psychology, even though they said that they had all these mental illnesses, still could not find a reason why they would be such a violent killer. But then we also read about St. Francis. And now he heard a voice which said, "Francis, go rebuild my church because it's falling down." And of course, St. Joan of Arc, who heard voices during her whole time as she was leading the army of the French. So voices, we hear these voices and they influence us all the time. And if we can harness those voices, the good angelic voices and good reasonable voices, we can become great saints or we can become great sinners. So the first, let me recap the 4 voices. We have the voice of reason, the voice of passion, the angelic voices, and diabolical voices. The first 2 voices, the voice of reason and the voice of passion, does fit within the realm of psychology. Psychology does have a lot of influence on those 2 voices, all right, mainly because they can influence our reason and our intellect and our will by certain books or whatever that we can do. While the voice of passion is tied to our body, and so they have a lot of intertwining of the body, and even drugs can influence our passion, and our emotions are in there through drugs and everything else that goes on. So those two are definitely influenced by psychology, as well as good spirituality. The next two voices, okay, the voice the angelic voices and the diabolical voices are not within the realm of psychology. In fact, psychology will not even study those. It has a big disdain on the supernatural. Yet those two voices do exist. Angelic voices are voices coming from angels or saints or maybe even God himself that allow us to come closer to him. And as of course, the diabolical voices are from Satan and the devils, okay, that want us to lead us to hell. So we have to understand that these four voices do influence us and predominantly influence our decision making as well as our actions, okay? So the first voice we're going to go in a deeper dive on is the voice of passion. And the reason why is because most of us follow this voice, all right? Most of it. So this voice isn't really audible, but it does influence our decisions and our actions, okay? The voice of passion, I also give them a nickname. The nickname of the voice of passion is called the comfort zone voice, okay? The lukewarm voice or the silent killer voice, okay? Why do I call it the lukewarm voice or comfort zone voice? The reason is that most of us the voice of passion puts us in what I call the comfort zone, where we just kind of just stay placid or lukewarm. We don't want to change. We want to just be in this comfort zone and not change, okay? And let me kind of say that it's a big spell on this voice. Has a big spell because we just kind of in this comfort zone. And we just follow our passion in whatever we do, okay? And let me kind of explain why, all right? So we all know that our passions we are born with a certain temperament, okay? St. Thomas Aquinas describes, and there's four main temperaments. You've got the phlegmatic, you've got your sanguine, you've got your melancholic, and your caloric, right? So we're kind of, and no one fits one model, no one's an extreme and whatever, but usually we have a predominant temperament and then a secondary temperament and then maybe a little splash of the other temperaments, right? And so we're kind of born with this temperament. But St. Thomas will say that our call to holiness, our call to perfection is being able to get all of the best qualities of all of the four temperaments, right? To be dead center in there so that we have all the good qualities. And so we then eliminate the bad parts of the other temperaments, okay? And that's called character building or virtue building, okay? So all through our lives, we're here to actually perfect ourselves. The perfect comes from the Latin perfectio, which means to complete. It doesn't mean to make no mistakes or no errors. Okay, to err is to be human, and to be human is to make mistakes. But we are to perfect ourselves. Why? Because our temperaments, in some ways, are imperfect. Okay, so we make our temperament perfect through virtue building virtue, practicing virtue. Okay, in the secular world, we would call that character building. Okay. So is it nature or nurture? It's both, okay? It's both. We naturally have our temperament, but then we have to nurture our character to be able to bring virtue into our lives, okay? And that's the tough part, because most of us don't want to use virtue. Most of us have fears and doubts that our passions give us, okay? So that we don't grow, okay? So you got to remember our passions. Here are some common things we have to understand about our passions, okay? First of all, our passions basically have a common or default influences, okay? And that is that it seeks the perceived good and avoids the perceived evil. That's basically what it does. But then our passions are tied to our bodies, okay? And our bodies have feelings. And our bodies will try to avoid pain and seek pleasure. Okay, that's what it does. So when you have a doctrine, or teaching like Jesus says, where he says, carry your cross. Well, that's going to be counterintuitive to what our body really desires, right? Our body, again, wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure, right? So in this case, it would be very bad for me to carry my cross because carrying the cross means pain, right? And that's not pleasure. So we would rather, just be lazy and kind of say, that's not what I want to do, all right? Also, you got to look at it and say, the perceived good is not for me to carry a cross because a cross hurts me, okay? That's a perceived evil. It's hurting me. But when we do virtue building, when we build, character, we actually want to think at a higher level so that the perceived good is actually at a higher level. And so our to seek the true pleasure is to be at the higher goal. What do I mean by that? So, for example, when I was in fourth grade, I always wanted to be in the military. And then eventually when I went to high school, I decided I wanted to be a Marine. Now that higher goal, the higher objective that I wanted, okay, elevated the perceived good. The perceived good here was I wanted to be a Marine. And I was willing to suffer, okay? And I did suffer, right? The humiliation, the hard exercising, the sleep deprivation, all these things to become a Marine. Because I sought this higher good, okay? And I was able to, practice these various virtues, okay, to accomplish this great goal. So I was able to, be self-disciplined, to be obedient to my superiors. We're talking like instant obedience. We're not just talking about, I'll think about it. It's instant when that sergeant told you to do something. To be self-disciplined, even during pain. We would be doing an ambush and you got bugs biting you all over the place and you just want to jump up and start itching all over the place, but you can't. Because if you did that, then your whole platoon would be killed or your squad would be killed. Okay? So we were able to build a lot of good virtues, okay, in doing that. So, but the problem is that if most people, and, because really athletes, I have to kind of narrow it down, athletes, military soldiers, priests and religious, they are their occupation really kind of forces people to create, character building. Now, but I will say this, okay? The difference between a military soldier and an athlete who does conform to some great virtues, and the difference between that and a religious and a priest is that when they're seeking perfection, they're going to get a well-rounded virtue building. Well, a soldier or Marine or any type of military person and an athlete, it's really myopic. They only emphasize certain types of virtues. And then the greater good is also far different. One is more seeking heavenly aspects, while the other one is serving worldly aspects of it. So, but those two jobs or professions really kind of focus this character building to seek virtue. All right. So, but most people don't do that. Most people actually are just complacent. If you look at what most people do is they go through school, and a lot of times school is just what they're doing. Most families don't emphasize virtue, so they just kind of, these kids, or we kind of lean on our best virtues and try to hide from our vices, or we have these vices and we limp along with the vices. Then after college, we get a job And again, that job is not going to emphasize virtue probably. It's just we're going to limp along. And even more importantly, those jobs are going to pick you out based off of what your predominant virtue is and not work on your bad virtues. This is basically, and I see it all the time at work. So I'll give you an example. You'll always find the sanguine people who will be outside salespeople. Why? Because they're fun to be with. They're extroverts. They're all these things, right? And so my job is actually it's a detriment actually to their spiritual growth, because I really want him or her to use that sanguine type of personality to make that deal. I'm not going to try to teach him to be, more like a melancholic or, more in-depth and meditative, or, a phlegmatic who is a little bit slower and more cautious, right? I'm not going to do that, because his ability to sell is his emotional high EQ and all these other great things. I have project managers. Who makes the best project managers? The choleric. The choleric makes the best project manager. They're just on time. They can do things, and they run meetings, and they manage the people. Boom, 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 boom. They're very work oriented. They're very detailed oriented. So work is actually just making these people very myopic in what's going on, because as a job occurs, I don't have time to teach these people, teach anyone where I work about, how to be well-rounded and virtuous and everything else. In fact, that might not make the best salesperson if they're well-rounded. Okay. Just like sports, we don't want, let's say football, we don't want everyone to be, 6'5", weighing 250 pounds, and they could throw a football, because everyone would be a quarterback, right? So you want the people to be quarterbacks. You want people to be linemen, where they're 300 pounds and they're 6'9", or you want them to be a running back that might be 6 feet tall and weighing 180 pounds, so they can be fast and quick. That's what society does. And so society says, go and be myopic, right? But in a spiritual sense, that doesn't really help us out, all right? So what happens is we just get into this comfort zone. We get into the zone where it's like, well, I'm only good at what I do, and that's it. And so I don't want to grow in holiness. And so a lot of times, the choleric will act choleric, They'll be, all business oriented. They'll, they're work. They're the people who will do all of the prayers nice and perfectly, but there's no empathy involved. There's no, I would say heart into it. All right. It's just a list of things to do. Okay. It's like the whole Martha and Mary story, right? They become the Martha. Okay. And then you got the sanguine, who is just overly emotional, and they're an emotional roller coaster. They're they're laughable. They're the life of the party, and that's what they're going to be, instead of being regimented, so they could do a good prayer life, so they could be virtuous and have an orarium so that they can pray and do these things. So that's what's going to happen. But these traits of the world are going to say, oh, he's still good. I'm making my sales, I'm making my money, and this is what happens, right? Or you got the phlegmatic who might be in a job that, working for maybe Amazon, that just does the same thing over and over and over again, okay? And because, phlegmatics are good at just doing repetitive actions, they don't really, they don't want fluid, dynamic changes that are going on, as long as things are very steady. In fact, I'm opening up another part of my business where I'm scanning, and I basically told the recruiters that I'm looking for people who just like doing the same thing over and over and over again. We don't want them to think. We just want them to do, because the job that I'm having them do is just very repetitive and boring. And people like the phlegmatic and even the melancholic, they would love things like that. Okay? Things that are just repetitive, no fluidity, no risk, nothing. Okay? But that doesn't build, virtue. It doesn't build us to be holistic, okay? And it doesn't make us grow to be holy. And yet, this is the predominant voice that we hear. And that's why I call it the comfort zone voice. We're just stuck in this comfort zone, or also called the lukewarm voice. And we see that. We see that even when people convert. They're all great, but they'll keep their old sanguine, mentality, as opposed to, what? I need to be more like, I need to slow down and be, more methodical. I might need to learn traits of the caloric. I might need to, a caloric who's more dedicated in what they're doing, more regimented. I might need to be, the caloric might say, I need to be more like the phlegmatic, slowing down, taking your pace, or be more like the melancholic, who really, thinks and meditates and deeply, takes things more deeply in an emotional way. Or the melancholic might learn from a sanguine to say, maybe I need to be more joyful, be a little bit more emotional, be a little bit more outgoing, okay? An extrovert. Or the phlegmatic, who might learn more with the caloric, who says, I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to move a little bit faster than I can, okay? So there's a lot of things we can learn, but it takes us courage to study another temperament and then putting our situation, our life, so that we can grow in that virtue. Because remember, virtue can't be taught. Virtue can only be acquired through practicing them. And how do we practice them? By putting ourselves in the situation that we need to. Okay? That's what we need to do. Okay, maybe the melancholic can go and, hand out miraculous metal to total strangers. It might be out of your comfort zone, but that's how you create virtue. Okay, maybe it's the caloric, who slows down and works at a soup kitchen, but instead of worrying about how many dishes they can feed, looking at the people who come in and looking them in the eyes, seeing the love that you can bring to them, and slowing down and showing them that love. This was the perfect way that Mother Teresa was able to do. She was able to bring love to every single person. And it wasn't about saving people's lives. It wasn't, it wasn't secular humanism about numbers. It was about every soul counted, and every soul should be loved. And so that's what we can do. But again, it goes outside our comfort zone. That's what we need to do. And that's why the voice of passion is really one of the worst enemies to listen to, because we just get stuck in this comfort zone. And I've seen it in not just in the secular world, but also in the religious. Meaning people who convert to the Catholic Church and they're like, great. It's the sanguine who's going out and trying to, dominate the world through apologetics, and then they get burnt out and then they leave the church. Or it's the caloric who converts, but they're just running over people because everything's a mission. Everything's a mission, and there's no heart in it. There's no love in it. It's just, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got that. Or I've seen, phlegmatics who do things for the church, but they're so, and maybe sometimes OCD, like it has to be this way. I can't be anywhere else. Okay. And now everyone has to tiptoe around them to, because they don't want to, hurt this person's feelings, because, this, the statue has to be a certain way, or this, the flowers have to be a certain way. but the thing about it is we have to get out of our comfort zone and build virtue. And that takes courage. That takes reason to do that. Okay? So what is wrong with this voice? Well, I mentioned a few of them, but the worst is we become complacent. We become lukewarm. Okay? Because we're not wanting to go outside of our comfort zone. Okay? And that's what building virtue and holiness is all about. We become imperfect and not really holy. Okay? Because we're not seeking perfection. We just are in this kind of imperfect world because we're just going to live in our own temperaments and not try to move and learn from the other temperaments. Okay? Sometimes, we base our decisions and our actions on our own emotions and feelings. Whatever they are, we're going to do it. So, for example, if I feel if I'm a caloric, I'm going to, feel like I'm just mission oriented. That's what I'm going to do. All right. I'm going to base everything on my decisions on this emotional or feelings that make me mission oriented. This is it. This is what I'm going to do. And I don't care who's in front of me. I'm just going to run them over, and because that's what makes me feel so good, is just being mission oriented. I'm going to just do. Okay. Instead of slowing down and saying, no, I got to slow down. Okay, this could actually hurt someone. Or you've got the sanguine who's just emotionally like, oh, I'm happy today, and then tomorrow he's angry, and the next day he's sad, and all these other things it's the emotional roller coaster that occurs. Okay, so in essence, what the voice of passion does is it actually puts us in what I call robotic mode. We just do what our temperament tells us to do. And that's it. And that we can't do that, okay? We have to be able to create good habits, virtues, and eliminate our vices, because that is in essence our goal, to become holy and perfect. All right? So how do we combat some of this stuff? Well, the one thing about our emotions and feelings is, and I can almost guarantee you at least 95% of the time, that our initial feelings, emotions are probably wrong, okay? Our initial feelings and emotions, okay? So whatever our initial feelings and emotions are, we need to say to ourselves, well, you know what? That's probably wrong, and let me use reason to see if it is wrong. And chances are it is. And I use an example, right? If the soldiers and the Marines who fought in World War II, when they were attacking the enemy, okay, the initial feelings and emotion is, I'm going to die, all right? And it's fear, okay? Fear. Well, that fear has to be, governed by right reason that says, hey, even though I'm afraid, the greater good is the defense of our nation, defense of the family, okay? Winning. So that is going to take over. And then virtue of courage kicks in, and we do what we need to do in there. It's the same thing. There's a lot of times where, my initial feelings of, let's say, so I'm more of a sanguine type of a person. So, emotions kind of hit me. So there's days where I love to do the liturgy of the hours. And then there's days where I'm like, I don't want to do the liturgy of the hours. And so I have to be willing to keep doing my orarium or my prayer at the certain hours, no matter how I feel. Even if my initial feelings are, I don't want to do this, I don't care about it, or whatever it is. But right reason kicks in, and I say, it's not about my feelings, okay? So the initial feelings have to be in check. So 95% of the time, it's usually incorrect. And so we have to go over there. So if you want to create a new virtue, let's say, with me, it's more about being more methodical. The initial emotion is going to be wrong. So for example, there's days where I don't want to work, and if that happens, then I'm not going to get any work. So I have to legitimately say, even though I don't want to work, okay, and I'm the boss, I am going to work, and I do it, okay. maybe it's the melancholic who feels sad and depressed, okay? That needs to say, I am sad and depressed, or if you have that feeling, but that's not what it is. I need to, exercise the virtue of joy, okay? Maybe it's the choleric who just wants to feel like I got missions to do, I got things I got to do, I got things that has to say, you know what? I need to calm my feelings and emotions down. I need to slow down. And, trust God and not go so fast and not run over people. Slow down and take the time to talk to the people. Talk to people to get to know them. And not in a, superficial way, but as deeply as possible as you can. So our initial feelings and how we are doing, we need to put in check and use virtue to kick in, okay, and the virtue of love. Another thing is before acting and deciding, use reason to think things out. Number 3, ask for advice, either experts or subject matter, spiritual directors or minimally a friend. You can do that. You can ask and say, well, am I melancholic? Am I doing this incorrectly? You can watch other people. I love, one thing I love about my wife is she falls under the choleric and I'm more sanguine. And I love just watching her, how she operates, how she works, how she gets over things, because, she's very, very productive. And so I love watching her and saying, well, I can learn from this, that and everything else. Recently, I have a friend of mine who's more of a phlegmatic, and, I'm watching, I'm going, wow, he is so happy not happy, but he's, I don't know how to explain it, but he's good with himself. And there seems to be a level of trust that's there. And, I look at it and I'm like, there's times where I'm kind of worried and I have anxiety and everything. And he's just at peace. He's just, that's what, most phlegmatics are. They're just kind of peace at themselves. And no matter how fast they go or how slow that they go, they're at peace. Okay. And so we can learn, from people's advice or maybe even watching other people. And of course, we pray to, ask God to help us. And then we try to build virtue necessary to better handle the passions. That's the key. Okay. I just want to emphasize, I'm not trying to say that passions are evil. They're not. Okay. And remember, it's the initial, emotions and feelings that we have to be on guard with. Okay. The real purpose of our passion is that when our passions are governed by our intellect and will, it becomes a very powerful force. That's what we call a Mother Teresa moment. Saint Mother Teresa was able to combine her passion with the virtues and right reason. Okay, that's what the Marines did as well. So we have to understand that passions aren't evil. It just needs to be governed, and our initial, our initial emotions and feelings in a situation, we need to put at bay 95% of the time, because it's usually incorrect. And we need to inject that with either reason or great virtue, and then harnessing the power of the passions to get the job done, the job that needs to get done. So the next is the voice of reason, okay? The voice of reasons are our thoughts, our ideas, our conscience, okay? And this one we do kind of hear because we can think out loud, or we can talk to ourselves in some ways. And our conscience, okay? Our conscience is, that judgment that weighs the law, like what we know about a certain law, whether it's canon law or whatever it is, and the action that we've done, and to say, hey, that's right or wrong, okay? But I'm going to tell you that our conscience isn't infallible, okay? We have to ensure that our conscience is well informed and well formed. Okay, there's two things. Formed, right? It has to be formed by the teachings of the Catholic Church, and well informed by the Catholic Church. Okay? So, this idea that our conscience is infallible is not right. Okay? We have to do it. So what can go wrong with the voice of reason, okay? The biggest problem we have with the voice of reason is we have bad information or lack of information, okay? Bad information. Or having bad or lack of reasoning skills, okay? So let's talk about information. If you're, I don't watch television. I don't listen to the radio, okay? I might listen to songs here and there or something like that, but the worst way that you can get bad information is through television, through commercials, through radio or anything like that. Watching the news, okay? This is where we start getting some bad information, okay? So we have to be able, because the problem is, and it's an old adage in the computer world, garbage in, garbage out. If you're going to hear and listen to garbage in, you're going to make bad decisions and actions garbage out, okay? So this is so important. So this is why spiritual reading is what we need to be doing. We need to have good spiritual reading so that we can have good information, so that we can make good reasoning skills, okay? The next is sin darkens the intellect and weakens the will. So every time we commit a mortal sin, and even venial sins will do that as well, but mostly is the mortal sins. It darkens the intellect and weakens the will. I was hearing a homily just the other day, and he pointed, the priest pointed out, actually he was a priest friend of mine, he pointed out that Adam and Eve, after they committed original sin, were actually very stupid because, after they committed original sin, they hid on God because God had to say, Adam and Eve, where are you? And they said, oh, we hid because we, ate this apple and we hid. They were so dumb that they forgot to know that God is omniscient, God is all-knowing, all-seeing, okay? Now, the first thing that Adam and Eve had before the fall were preternatural gifts, and one of them was they were highly intelligent, okay? But as soon as they fell and committed sin, they became dumb, okay? They became dumb, and they forgot that God is all-knowing and all-seeing. So that's what sin does. It darkens the intellect and weakens our will. We're influenced by our passions, diabolical influences. So a lot of times, sometimes we don't use our reason. We just let our passions take off, where we might listen to diabolical influences, which is bad, okay? Another thing that can go wrong is we're listening to bad counseling, okay, or not having counseling, okay? So, if you have, people who are just bad, bad friends, bad company, okay, who are influencing you to go to bars or drinking or doing all these crazy things, that's going to eschew your reason, okay? If you think about all of the, if you think about the Catholic Church right now, okay, we're having a presidential election this year, okay? And so every time, I don't know how many people come up to me and they'll say, did you watch the presidential debate? Did you do this? Are you watching the race? Are you doing this? Do you see what's going on? And I tell them, no, I don't follow the presidential race. I don't follow the debate. Why? Why do I need to? Okay? As if this is some kind of sport, right? A blood sport. All right. The fact of the matter is, okay, I lined up two potential presidents, okay, and I follow the platform. I know what one platform stands. I know where the other platform stands. I know where the Catholic Church, fits within those two platforms. I vote for the president, okay, that will fit the Catholic platform, okay? That's all you need to do, okay? Whether he can debate well, whether he can, have a smile on his face, or whether he looks pretty or handsome or whatever it is, not an issue for me, okay? Because reason is going to dictate who I vote for, not emotions, okay? That's the whole point. So why do we need to do that, okay? Now, if their platform is ambiguous and everything is going on, I would say to you, yes, maybe I might have to watch the debate to figure out and clarify what's going on. but I don't need to. Not as a good Catholic, not in this election. Okay? But what happens is a lot of Catholics are watching this and they're getting askewed. They're getting totally askewed on what the heart of the matter of the election is all about. Okay? So we have to use our reason, not our emotion, feelings. Oh, he spoke badly about this, or he was bad, or that. Whatever it is. Follow the platform. Follow what the Catholic Church teaches. What's morally acceptable and what is not. Okay? And that should determine what you vote for or who you vote for. The other thing is, in the reason, is scruples could go wrong, is, the scruples, warped sense of conscience. We silence our conscience with bad information and the wrong sense of right or wrong. As I said, conscience is not infallible, okay? If you look at Hitler Youth, okay, Hitler Youth in Nazi Germany, they were taught to basically hate Jews, okay, and to, kill them. And so the constant teaching of these, German children silenced this idea of right or wrong, okay, and their conscience. So we can silence our conscience. We can also, teach people what is right is really wrong and what is wrong really right. We can eschew that, okay? As I said, conscience is not infallible. This is why the teachings of the Catholic Church on moral theology is so important, so that we can make the right decisions, okay? So what can we do in this voice of reason, okay? Stop relying on your feelings and emotions to make your decisions, okay? Especially your initial emotions and feelings, right? How many, you have that, elderly grandmother who has the, 50-year-old son who is an alcoholic or a drug addict, who, and she just keeps feeding that person money so that they could be addicted to the drugs or whatever, instead of saying, no, you need to leave the house, or doing some kind of tough love so that they can straighten out. But the feeling of, oh, well, I'm his mother and I got to take care of him, okay? Or how many times have, we don't want to be correcting our children because we don't want to be the bad parent, okay? So and the initial feelings have to be, squelched. So some people, especially the sanguine and melancholic, we have to turn off our EQ. EQ stands for emotional quotient. A lot of people don't realize, but an emotional quotient is, again, not infallible. It could be wrong. So I'm a sanguine. I have a high EQ, but I've been wrong with my EQ, and I've learned to just shut the EQ off most cases. EQ isn't wrong. EQ is good because it allows us to be empathetic. And so you have to use it methodically and very, surgically. You can't leave it on all the time. But a lot of people rely on it, especially sanguine, because it's almost like they use it as like the way to preempt, people's feelings and actions and everything else. But I can tell you, EQ is not infallible. You can make a lot of mistakes, and then it causes more anxiety and issues than anything else. Read good books, good information. The Bibles, the saints, theology, classical philosophy. Those are the things that you want to read, believe it or not. I mean, I'm a computer science major, and I read a lot of those books to help me grow, books on spirituality. Join good organizations which promote good information, Third Order, Legion of Mary, men's group, those types of things. Here's another big one. Ignorance is bliss. Yeah, ignorance is bliss. Avoid bad information. TV, news, internet, all these things. Why? Okay? Why do you need to watch that type of stuff? F, use our intellect and will to govern our passions. We got to use our intellect and will to govern our passions. Remember, our passions aren't bad. It's just that it has to be governed by our intellect and our will. Okay? In most cases, do not trust the initial emotions or feelings in the situation. Okay? So when we're building virtue and we want to come out of ourselves, so let's say, for example, I'm a sanguine, and so I don't like to be regimented. So, when I have that initial feeling of, I don't want to wake up, or I don't want to, do my prayers, we have to put that initial feeling at bay and just say, no, this is how I build virtue, and then do our prayers, okay? Or wake up. So we have to, understand that our initial emotions are not the judgment on our feelings. So we need to inject, put the initial feelings at bay, and then, think about what we're doing so that we can actually do the right thing. Practice the virtue of prudence. Stop, think, and act. That's why I tell my kids, you just have to stop, think, and act. And then practice the virtue of patience. And then we have to make sure that we form our conscience correctly. Good moral theology. If you can't do that, then talk to a good holy priest. They will help out with, a spiritual director, or even a spiritual coach will help out. So those are the things that, the voice of reason occurs and what happens. Now let's talk about the diabolical voice. Okay. So the next two we're going to talk about, the psychology is not going to affect. Okay. In fact, they have a disdain for it because it's in the realm of the supernatural. And that is diabolical voice and angelic voice. All right. So theology and spirituality is going to help you in this category. So let's talk about the diabolical voices. Okay. These are voices from Satan and the devil. Okay. These are the voices that, I think that the two shooters, okay, Adam Lanza and Stephen Paddock, heard that encouraged them to kill innocent men, women, and children. Okay, because even with mental illness, it still doesn't give them a reason to kill, and I think these voices did. And one of the things that I will always say is that we are constantly influenced by diabolical voices. We always have, diabolical obsessions. Okay, these are small little voices, just like there's going to be guardian angels that whisper in your ear. These diabolical voices will influence you in soft tones. Okay, things like your daughter always makes fun of you. She's always wanting to disrespect you, or your wife isn't the best wife. She has so many of these faults and so many issues and stuff. That's what happens. These soft little voices, telling you all the problems and all the issues that are out there. Okay, some of them may even be loud and audible. That's sounds like Stephen Paddock and Adam Lanza had those as described by eyewitnesses. Okay. So what can go wrong if we listen to these voices? Well, it leads us to hell, sooner or later, or, best case scenario, to purgatory. It torments us, okay? It leads us to make bad decisions and actions. It leads us to despair, okay? And then lastly, it leads us to shame and guilt, all right? So, those voices might not be ones that you say, hey, go kill, 20 people or whatever. They might be things like, hey, that woman over there look attractive. So they might lead to lust. They might lead us to stealing, covetousness, all these things. So it doesn't have to be that it leads us to, get a gun and start shooting people, because mortal sins are in the realm of lust, or in the realm of stealing. They might be saying like, oh, you know what? If you just steal, $100,000, you'll be on easy streak, and you don't have to worry about anything. Okay, so we need to be able to ignore and block them out. Okay, that's what we got to do. And discern which ones are diabolical and angelic, okay? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So let's talk about the angelic voices now, okay? These are voices we hear from our guardian angels, other angels, and saints, and possibly directly from God, okay? So most of the time, it will be hearing our guardian angels. That's really the most important, because we'll be in tune to the guardian angels, because their job is really to guard us and to guide us. Okay, that's what the angel of the guardian angel prayer talks about, guide and to protect us. So this is where the real power comes into play, because we need that guidance, and that guidance comes from our guardian angel. Okay. We just need to be in tune. We need to hear our guardian angel. So when we're seeking holiness, this is the power of our guardian angels need to be able to help us along. And usually the guardian angels are very soft, okay? And so we need to be in tune to listen to them. The other, you might also hear other angels, as St. Joan of Arc did, or saints, as my wife did. My wife heard St. Padre Pio, as I mentioned in my last episode. So, that can happen. Okay? What can go wrong? A lot of times, the reason why we don't listen to the angelic voices is we don't hear them, even though they are there. Why don't we hear them? Because we silence them with doubt. Okay? How many times have we heard something, we're like, well, I don't know. What was that? Okay. Maybe not, right? Or emotions, or through our passions, because we're just in robotic mode and listening to the voice of passion. Lack of faith, lack of silence. You have to be very silent to hear the guardian angel. Okay, but how many times do we always listen to the radio or put on the television? I don't know how many times I go to not so much my friends immediate, but other friends' houses, or even my own family, my brothers and sisters, and the television has to be on, okay? As if silence is some kind of deadly disease or something like that, okay? So bad reasoning. Sometimes bad reasoning is we don't listen to it. Or we use worldly reasoning, saying, these guardian angels, they don't exist. Or even worse, in the Catholic Church, we've domesticated the guardian angel, okay? We've made the guardian angel, it's that famous picture of the guardian angel, and you have these two little kids walking over a bridge. First of all, it doesn't look like the bridge is going to fall anyhow, okay? And you got this guardian angel. And so we domesticated the guardian angel that it only protects children, okay? And yet, it's not just protection, it's guidance. He actually guides us. And so we as adults need more guidance than children do, okay? Because we're in this world fighting this battle. And so we need the guardian angels to, help us along, okay? So and stop, just like we domesticate St. Francis, where we basically put him in a garden and say, he's the, saint of the creatures, okay? And so we put him in the garden, and that's what we do. And yet St. Francis is so much more than the garden saint, okay? He is, just so much more, okay? And it's kind of, I would say, depressing that we're limiting him just to do that, okay? I don't know how many times, we talk about the animal blessings, as, we bring up St. Francis, it's the feast of St. Francis, so it's the blessing of the animals. Well, that's really domesticating St. Francis, okay? And so we've domesticated our guardian angel to be this, picture of protecting these two little kids crossing a bridge, okay? When really there's so much more to this, to the saints, okay? So, what can we do? We need to be in tune. So what else we need? We need time, silent time. We need to be in tune to gentle voices. We need to have an horarium, because a lot of times the guardian angels will be kind of like a reminder, okay? Almost like, a little alarm to say, hey, you need to do this. And that horarium is what he's going to remind you of, okay? We need to have a sensitive spirit, okay? Our spirit needs to be more sensitive. Our soul needs to be more sensitive, okay? This might hit more the cholerics. Cholerics don't have as much of a sensitive spirit as maybe like a phlegmatic, a melancholic, or even a sanguine. So you gotta have that ability to have a little bit more sensitive spirit, because it is such a soft tone that the guardian angel whispers. And then lastly is discernment of spirits. Okay, we have to discern the spirits, in this case, the diabolical. So that's where what we're going to talk about next is how do we really discern the voices that are diabolical versus the ones that are angelic. Now, I can only give some guidance, okay? I'm not going to say, well, if this happens, that happens, just general guidance, okay? And a good spiritual director will help you discern better, and those types of things. So first thing is, one thing is that diabolical voices are unreasonable. It's like if you ever, calculate certain things, it's like, wow, that doesn't really make sense. Well, angelic voices are reasonable, okay? Diabolical voices will lead us away from the church. Listen to that. Diabolical voices will lead us away from the church, while angelic voices lead us to the church. In fact, when the Catholic Church investigates a miracle, one of the things they ask, because you've got to remember, good angels and bad angels can heal because they're both angels, right? So, but the difference is what they have to study is this healing, the supernatural healing, is it coming from God? And the way they determine that, is simply is this healing leading people to the church? Okay? If it is, then it's probably miraculous and coming from God. If it isn't, it's diabolical. It's the same thing. If these influences, these voices are leading us to the church and having a greater fervor to the church, okay? The church, which is the bride of Christ, the church, which Christ is head of, okay? Then it's angelic. But if these voices are leading us away, leading us to schismatic churches or, leading us to Protestant churches or whatever, chances are they're diabolical. Second, diabolical voices lead us to bad things, okay? Angelic voices lead us to good things. Diabolical voices are accusative, right? Remember, Satan is the accuser who accuses us night and day. Well, angelics are more suggestive, okay? They're more leading, all right? In other words, when I hear my guardian angel, he'll say something like, you should be doing your liturgy of the hours, or you should be sorry for yelling at your son like that, okay? More suggestive. Well, diabolical will be more accusative, ooh, look how bad you are. You're a bad father, because you yelled at your son like that, all right? Or you're a bad husband because, you don't provide for your family or whatever. It's very accusative. Number 4, diabolical voices bring fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's like, fear. Okay, I'm afraid. I know I might fail. I might not be able to hand out a miraculous medal. What if they ask me questions that I don't know theologically? Okay? The uncertainty. I have never done this before. Okay, I don't know if I can do this. Okay, I don't know if I can work at a soup kitchen. I don't know if I can look at a person with, loving eyes. What am I supposed to say? Okay? So they're going to talk about all the fears and uncertainty. You've never done this before. Or you're bad at doing this. Okay? Or, don't even try because you'll just fail. Those are the fears, uncertainty, and doubt that the devil wants you to hear. Well, angelic voices will bring hope and peace and love. They really will. This is a loving act. This is a loving act to feed the hungry. This is a loving act bringing a miraculous medal to those who need hope. Okay? Diabolical voices will tempt. Okay? They will tempt you. All right? Oh, look at that woman. She's dressed so beautifully. Okay? Wouldn't you like to date her? All right? There's a good movie on. You should watch it. Oh yeah, so it has some, violent, sex and all the other stuff in it. It doesn't matter. You should watch it. Okay? Well, angelic voices aren't tempting. Okay? They lead us into holiness. They lead us into hope and love. Diabolical voices will use our memory of passions against us and shut down reason. That's one thing it wants to do, is shut down reason. And it will use passion and our memories, okay, against us. Oh, your wife is always nagging. Your daughter's always yelling at you and being sassy at you. Or your son is always being disrespectful. Okay? Your kids don't love you. Those are the words of a diabolical voice. Okay? Angelic voices will use our memory and passion to inspire and bring us joy, peace, and love. All right? Things like, oh, do you remember when you walked with your daughter for the first time, when you held her hands, when you walked the aisle with your wife, when you gave her the first kiss? Those are peace and joy and love. Diabolical voices are usually harsh. They're very harsh. You are bad. You cannot succeed. You're not loving. Okay, those are harsh words. Angelic voices are soft. In most cases, barely even heard. Come. You should be doing your liturgy of the hours. You should, diabolical voices torment. Okay? They torment us. Okay? They give us anxiety. They give us angst. Angelic voices don't. They bring us peace. Diabolical voices make us shameful and guilt-ridden. Okay? You are guilty. You'll never be forgiven. Never, ever be forgiven. Shame on you. God can't forgive you. Angelic voices lead us to a disappointment and filial fear. Disappointment that I disappointed God. But disappointment is not the same as shame. I'm going to do better when I'm disappointed. I know I failed you, Dad. I know I failed you, Father. But I'm going to do better. Filial fear. Fear because you hurt the person you love. That's what angelic voices bring. He's your Father. He loves you. You don't want to disappoint him. So those are good ways of discerning which voices that you have. So any sign of that negativity, the fear and doubt to grow in holiness, is all coming from diabolical voices. But those that suggest, those that lead us to the church, that lead us to grow in holiness, those are angelic voices. So to kind of summarize it and to conclude, we all have voices in our heads that influence our decisions and actions. There are 4 voices, which are voice of reason, voice of passion, angelic voices, and diabolical voices. Most of us are influenced by the voice of passion, which makes us lukewarm because we're just in this comfort zone we have created, which prevents us from seeking holiness. More importantly, we typically are not aware of the diabolical voices, which brings us down and prevents us from growing in holiness. We need to use our voice of reason to build virtue, make sound decisions, and most importantly, to listen to the soft and gentle voices of our guardian angels on a daily manner to help us do our prayers, have gently disappointments for our wrongs, and lead us to good decisions and actions. Let's end it with a prayer. Dear guardian angel, help us to listen to you. Help us to be in tune to your word. Help us to use you. For that is the assignment that God has given you, for you to serve us, for you to bring us to heaven. Let us pray. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, ever this day be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. Amen. Thanks for listening to me, David Cease, at Practical Catholic. Please share this podcast to others, especially if they have benefited you. Also, feel free to share any reflections or leave a comment on the podcast, Instagram, and Facebook at Practical Catholic, or visit my webpage at practicalcatholic1, that is the number 1.com.
You're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.